I was born in the dark. Not the kind that comes when lights fail or candles die, but the kind that presses against your lungs and never leaves. Down here in the veins of the hive, the air tastes of rust and promethium, and the walls hum with the slow heartbeat of machines older than memory. They say the Emperor sees all, that his golden gaze pierces even these depths. But if he does, he must look away often. For what lives here is not his glory, but his burden, the forgotten hands that keep his Imperium breathing. I am one of them. I do not know my mother's face, only the rhythm of the production line, the hiss of steam, the crack of overseer lashes echoing like prayers. The ceiling above me may as well be the stars, unreachable, mythic, cruel, and yet every cycle, I lift my eyes toward it and whisper the same words that every slave learns: the Emperor protects. The morning horn doesn't wake me, it never does. I'm already awake when it screams through the ducts, a low metallic roar that shakes the sleeping stacks. The sound crawls down the walls, rattling the pipes and stirring the half-dead. Around me bodies move in slow shuffling rhythm, still half lost to dreams they'll never remember. Some pray, some curse, most simply move. There is no difference between the two down here. The dorm's heat regulators failed cycles ago. Now condensation drips from the metal beams, gathering into dark puddles between the bunks. The water smells faintly of oil, and when I splash through it, I see the reflection of the manufacturum lights flickering far above, distant, trembling, like false stars. That's how I measure my mornings, by reflections of someone else's work. I dress in silence. The standard issue rags are stiff with grime, and the fabric chafes against my skin, but the pain is grounding. It reminds me I'm still flesh, not yet a servitor. That thought alone gives me the smallest spark of defiance, though I bury it deep before anyone can see. Hope is a dangerous thing here. It makes you noticeable, and nothing noticeable survives long. The corridors outside hum with movement, hundreds of us, thousands maybe, all herded toward the shift gates like cattle. The sound of boots against metal is a kind of music, one the overseers seem to enjoy. They stand on raised platforms with shock staves and vox grills, barking orders through the static. The words blend together after a while, but the meaning is always the same: work, produce, endure. When I step into the manufacturum proper, the world becomes fire. The air is thick with heat and smoke, the scent of molten metal mingling with sweat and ozone. Conveyor belts stretch in every direction, carrying weapon components, shell casings, and the unending detritus of war. I've been told we're building parts for the Astra Militarum, rifles, tank treads, ammunition for battles fought on worlds whose names I'll never know. But it doesn't matter. To us, the wars are myths. We are not soldiers, we are the ghosts that feed their machines. I take my place at the press station. The machine is ancient, its gears slick with oil and old blood. My job is simple: align the mold, pull the lever, release. Thousands of repetitions, each one a small erosion of self. I can't remember when I stopped feeling the burn in my arms, or the ache in my back. Pain becomes background noise here, like the endless thunder of industry, or the distant scream of metal grinding metal. Sometimes I think about the world above, the spires, where the nobles breathe filtered air, and drink real water. They say sunlight touches the towers there, that you can see the sky through the glass domes. I used to believe that was just another lie, like the Emperor's mercy, or the promise of rest after death. But once a maintenance crew returned from the upper sectors, their faces pale and eyes wild. One of them whispered to me that he'd seen it, real light, soft and golden. For a moment, I hated him for saying it. Then I realized he hadn't spoken of it like a blessing, he'd spoken of it like something that burned. The overseer's vox crackle pulls me back. Unit 1253, output lagging. His voice is thick with distortion, but I know it's directed at my row. I glance down at my counter, one mold short. The error seems insignificant, but in the Imperium, insignificance is a sin. Before I can correct it, a bolt of agony surges through me. The shock staff hits my shoulder, searing through fabric and flesh. I drop to my knees, biting back a scream. Stand, the overseer hisses. Serve, I do, not because I want to, but because the alternative is worse. They say those who falter are sent to the flesh vats, stripped of will, and turned into servitors. I've seen them, hollow-eyed husks wired into the machines, their humanity drained away drop by drop. They don't suffer anymore, I think, but I don't envy them. Hours stretch like centuries. When the final horn sounds, I barely recognize the sound of release. My hands tremble as I clean the press and step away from my station. Around me, workers move like shades, their faces expressionless, skin grayed by soot. Some whisper prayers to the Omnissiah, others just stare at their bleeding palms. I walk home through corridors that smell of rust and sorrow. In the distance a hymn echoes, a mechanized choir singing praises to the Emperor. The sound is beautiful in a cruel way, a reminder that faith is just another form of obedience. Still, I find myself whispering along, not because I believe, but because it's safer to pretend I do. When night comes, it doesn't bring darkness, only a dull red glow from the manufactorum vents that never truly fade. Sleep is rationed here like food or oxygen, distributed in hours and half hours, always interrupted by the groaning of machinery or the shriek of servitors grinding through maintenance corridors. I lie on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, tracing the veins of corrosion spreading across the metal plates. They remind me of rivers, or at least how I imagine rivers must look. No one here remembers water that moves. The only streams we know are the leaking pipes that drip oily residue into our cups, and even that we drink gratefully. I try not to think about the taste. It's easier to let my mind drift somewhere else, though somewhere else doesn't really exist anymore. The hive is all there is. Everything outside it, other worlds, other stars, belongs to stories. Across from me, a worker named Jorah hums an old hymn. She does it quietly, so the overseers don't hear, her voice thin but steady. I've shared this dawn with her for years, though I don't know much about her beyond the fact that she once had a child. The child's name was taken from her records when she was reassigned here, but she still hums to it, a melody meant for someone who'll never hear it again. Sometimes I envy her faith, not in the Emperor, but in the act of remembering. It takes courage to carry the weight of a face you'll never see again. I've forgotten everyone I ever loved, or maybe I've convinced myself I have. I can't tell the difference anymore. When the shift horns blare again, I feel no sense of time passing. It could have been hours or days. The hive doesn't mark seasons or sunrise. There's only the rhythm of work and exhaustion. My hands ache as I return to the press station. Every lever pull leaves a faint vibration in my bones, a ghost of motion that lingers long after I stop. The overseer is different today, a younger man with eyes too sharp, too alive for this place. He watches us the way a starving animal studies meat. There's a hunger in him that frightens me more than his weapon. I wonder how long it'll take before the hive hollows him out like the rest of us. Maybe it already has. Mid-shift, one of the machines fails. The press jams, gears screeching in protest. Sparks scatter across the floor like dying stars, and for a brief moment everything stops. I see one of the workers, an older man named Keir, frozen beside his station, his expression caught somewhere between terror and awe. Then the overseer moves, raising his staff. The punishment is quick. A single shock, then another. Keir collapses, twitching, smoke rising from his robes. No one speaks. No one even looks up. The machine roars back to life, drowning the smell of burnt flesh with smoke and heat. I keep pulling the lever, aligning the mold, releasing, pulling again. The cycle swallows him whole, and by the next hour he's forgotten, his body dragged away, his name reassigned to another shift. But I always remember the silence that followed, heavier than the hum of machinery. It pressed into me, filling the hollow places where fear used to be. Later during the break, I find myself staring at the far wall, a massive slab of adamantine etched with the imperial aquila. The twin-headed eagle looms above us, its wings cracked and blackened by soot. To some it's a sacred symbol, a promise of unity beneath the Emperor's light. To me it's a reminder of how small we are beneath it. The wings don't shelter, they smother. Jorah sits beside me, her hands raw from labor. She glances at the aquila, then at me. "Do you think he knows we exist?" she asks, her voice barely audible. I don't answer right away. I want to tell her no, that the Emperor's gaze doesn't reach this deep, that we are the forgotten marrow of his empire. But the words die before I can speak them. Maybe honesty would break her in a way cruelty never could. "I think he remembers the work," I say instead. "That's enough." She smiles faintly, though we both know it's a lie. Then the horn sounds again, and we rise together, like ghosts pulled by invisible strings. When the shift finally ends, I linger near the exit, watching the overseer file reports into a data slate. The faint blue light illuminates his face, young, human, weary. For a heartbeat, he looks almost like one of us. Then the mask returns, and he disappears into the upper corridors. I walk home through the echoing tunnels, past the flickering lumen strips, and the stains on the walls that might be rust or blood. My reflection stares back at me from a puddle near the drainage grate, eyes sunken, face hollow, jaw clenched. I don't recognize the man looking back. Somewhere deep inside the hive, a bell toll. It's not for worship, not for death, it's just another shift ending, another day swallowed by the endless machine. Still it echoes like morning. I used to believe that life could not get quieter than this, that the hum of the machines and the groan of the pipes were the silence of the world, but the hive knows deeper silences, the kind that settles beneath the skin, heavy and slow, until even your thoughts sound muffled. That's the kind of silence I woke into today, the kind that makes you realize something has changed, though you can't yet name what. The corridors outside my dorm were emptier than usual. The shift horns had not sounded. No lights flickered through the ventilation grills. Only a low vibration, like the distant heartbeat of the hive itself, pulsed through the floor. It was strange, wrong, but I found myself grateful for the pause. My body ached in ways it never fully recovered from. Each joint felt rusted, like the machine I served was slowly rebuilding me in its own image. When I reached the manufactorum gate, I saw the overseer's post vacant. A single vox unit crackled with static, whispering fragments of unrecognizable words. Something had interrupted the rhythm, and that never happened. Not here. The others gathered near the workstations, their faces pale under the dull light. Someone muttered about sabotage, others about a gas leak. I stood in silence, my gaze fixed on the suspended cranes motionless above the half-assembled hull of a cargo lifter. Everything was frozen in mid-gesture, as if the world had been paused by a forgotten god. Then, without warning, the vox burst into life. A single word, containment, repeated again and again, each time more distorted. Then silence returned, heavier than before. I don't know how long we waited. The hive has no windows, no clocks, just the rhythm of fear. When the overseer finally appeared, his expression was blank, his steps too measured. Behind him came a squad of Arbites, enforcers of the Lex Imperialis. Black carapace armor gleamed under the lumen strips, visors reflecting our faces like distorted shadows. They ordered us to form lines. No one resisted. In the hive, obedience is instinct, not choice. We were told there had been a breach. Someone, or something, had entered from the lower sectors. They didn't say what, only that it was heretical. The word alone was enough to twist my stomach. Heresy was death, not just of the body but of the soul. The Arbites moved through the line, scanning each worker with handheld Auspex units. The devices whirred and clicked, their glow painting our faces in pale blue light. When one of the scanners emitted a sharp tone, the enforcer seized a man by the collar, a wiry worker with grease-stained hands. His protests were swallowed by the noise of boots and armor. They dragged him toward the exit, his voice fading into the machinery. We never saw him again. After that, the overseer told us to resume work. The interruption was over, order had been restored, and we obeyed, because that's all we've ever known how to do. As the hours passed, the hum returned to the manufactorum, but the rhythm felt off, uneven, like a song missing its heart. Every clank of the press sounded like a question I didn't want to answer. By the next rest cycle, the dorms were quieter than usual. Several bunks were empty, stripped bare. Jorah didn't return. Her name was gone from the labor roster. I asked one of the scribes about her, but he only frowned and said, "Records show she was reassigned." Reassigned, the word that hides 1,000 graves. That night, I dreamt of the lower levels. I saw corridors bending into darkness, filled with shapes that weren't human, but moved like they remembered being so. I heard the hum of machinery, but beneath it, another rhythm, softer, slower, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. When I woke, my hands were trembling. The next day, I was assigned to repair work near the coolant conduits. It was quieter there, and the air tasted faintly of iron. As I knelt beside the leaking pipes, I saw something unusual, a smear of greenish residue seeping from the metal, pulsing faintly as if alive. I touched it without thinking. It was warm. For the rest of the shift, my skin tingled where the residue had touched me. I told myself it was chemical irritation, nothing more. But by the time I returned to my dorm, the mark had darkened, a faint green line crawling along the veins of my wrist. I wrapped it in cloth, whispered a prayer I no longer believed in, and told myself it would fade. It didn't. As I lay down, I could hear the pipes above whispering, not in the usual language of steam and pressure, but something else. A low murmur, almost melodic. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them, threading through my thoughts like roots. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of work or death. I dreamt of something vast and breathing beneath the hive, something that watched, something that waited, and when I woke, I wasn't afraid, only curious. I kept the mark hidden for days. In the hive, a wound is a liability, a weakness that draws attention, and attention means punishment. The overseers do not need excuses to purge, they simply require efficiency, so I covered it beneath my sleeve and pretended not to feel the pulse beneath my skin. It beat faintly, out of rhythm with my heart, as if it had found its own tempo. Slower, deliberate, alive, the work continued as it always did. Endless presses, endless noise, the same gray slurry of recycled air and oil-slick shadows. But now I noticed things I had ignored before. The residue on the walls that shimmered faintly in the dark, the whispers in the pipes that rose and fell like breathing. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to bend around me, softening when I passed. I told myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion had finally begun to rot my senses, but the more I tried to dismiss it, the clearer it became. During one of the late shifts, while we worked beneath the coolant vanes, the overseer collapsed. It happened without warning. One moment he was barking orders through his Vox grill, the next he was clutching his throat, his skin blistering beneath his collar. The Arbites were called in, their heavy boots pounding through the corridor, but when they lifted his body, a patch of green fungus had already begun to spread across his jaw. The others recoiled. I didn't, I just watched, feeling the pulse in my wrist quicken in quiet recognition. By the next cycle, rumors were spreading, soft forbidden talk whispered between machines. Some said the lower sectors had been sealed off entirely. Others claimed to have seen shapes moving behind the filtration vents, shapes that weren't human. The Arbites began regular inspections, pulling workers aside, their auspex devices sweeping over our skin. Each time they passed by me, the mark on my wrist burned faintly, yet the scanner never reacted. It was as if it refused to see me. That night, I sat alone in the maintenance tunnel. The lights above flickered weakly, casting the walls in shifting gold and green. I unwrapped my wrist for the first time in days. The mark had grown, thin branching veins spreading like ivy beneath my flesh. It should have horrified me. Instead, it fascinated me. When I pressed my fingers to it, I felt warmth, not pain, not sickness, but something almost gentle. A hum echoed through my bones, soft and melodic, like the sound of the manufactorum at rest. It was the same rhythm I had heard in my dreams. I whispered into the dark, though I didn't know to whom. "What are you?" For a long moment, there was no answer, only the faint hiss of steam, the distant clatter of gears. Then beneath it all, I heard it again, a voice so low it barely existed. Not words, not even sound, more like a feeling, a presence pressing against the inside of my skull. It didn't threaten, it beckoned. When I finally returned to the dorm, I couldn't sleep. I watched the others in their bunks, their faces slack, breathing shallow. They looked already dead, shells going through motion. I realized then that whatever was happening to me, it was different. I felt something stir inside me, not fear, not yet, but a strange kind of awareness, a sense that the world was wider than the steel walls allowed. The next day, the Arbites came again. This time, they didn't scan, they dragged people out in chains, one by one, accusing them of contamination. I recognized their voices, friends, co-workers, though I could barely remember their faces anymore. I wanted to speak, to defend them, but my voice refused to rise. Somewhere deep inside, I knew they weren't the ones being hunted. I was, as they left, hauling the screaming workers down the corridor. I caught sight of the trail they left behind, droplets of something green and glistening, soaking into the floor. No one else seemed to see it. I stared at it long after they disappeared, feeling the mark on my wrist throb in answer. When I returned to my station, I caught my reflection in the coolant pipe, my eyes glinting faintly under the lights. Not bright enough to be noticed by others, but enough for me to see. There was something beneath the surface now, something moving. That night, when the shift finally ended, I didn't go back to the dorm. I followed the pipes instead, down past the sleeping quarters, past the sealed bulkheads, into the tunnels where the heat turned the air thick and metallic. The sound was louder there, the hum, the whisper, the call. The deeper I went, the stronger it became. I felt it vibrating in my bones, guiding me like a pulse leading back to a heart I'd forgotten existed. When I reached the end of the tunnel, I found a rusted door half open, leaking faint green light from within. The air smelled of decay and sweetness, a scent both repulsive and inviting. I stood there for a long time, my hand trembling over the latch, and when I finally pushed the door open, the light greeted me like an old friend. The room beyond the rusted door wasn't large, no grand vault or secret shrine, just a forgotten storage chamber, half collapsed beneath the weight of neglect. The floor was littered with scraps of metal, old ration tins and a tangle of corroded pipes. But at the center stood something that didn't belong. It was a pool, not of water, not entirely, but of some living substance, viscous, green gold, and faintly luminescent. The surface rippled, breathing in slow rhythm like the lungs of a sleeping beast. The smell was heavy, a mix of rot and life, of compost and rain-soaked soil. I should have recoiled, I should have run. Instead I stepped closer, drawn by a quiet understanding that this was the source. The hum I had felt through the walls wasn't machinery, it was this. I knelt beside it. The surface reflected my face, warped, rippled, as if the liquid remembered other faces before mine. I reached out, hesitated, and then touched it. The warmth spread through me instantly, not burning but enveloping, a pulse that moved up my arm like the heartbeat of something ancient. Visions erupted behind my eyes, cities crumbling beneath vines of flesh, towers melting into fields of pulsing growth, bones sprouting flowers in the dark. I saw the endless cycle of decay and renewal, the hunger of entropy made sacred, and through it all I heard a voice. Not words but a feeling, deep and resonant, echoing from far beyond the stars. It didn't command, it invited. You suffer, it seemed to say. You labor, and they forget you. Come, be remembered by what never forgets. I tore my hand back with a gasp. The room was silent again. The hum had stopped. Only my own heartbeat filled the air. For a long time I stared at the pool, waiting for it to move again, to speak again, but it was still. When I finally rose to leave, I felt different, lighter. The exhaustion that had lived in my bones since birth was gone. I walked back through the tunnels with steady steps, my mind quiet, my pulse steady. For the first time in years I wasn't afraid. But peace in the hive never lasts. The next cycle, the Arbites descended with purging teams. The alarms wailed through every corridor. Word spread that contamination had reached the upper manufactoria. Whole units were being burned, the sick and the healthy alike. I watched as the purifiers marched past with flamers primed, their white armor stained with soot and blood. They were coming for the lower sectors next. I returned to my dorm to find it empty. Only the sound of dripping water and distant gunfire remained. My bunk was overturned, the air thick with disinfectant and smoke. I sat there for a long time, my hands folded over the mark on my wrist. It pulsed faintly, calm, patient, as if it already knew what was coming. When the purifiers finally reached our corridor, I didn't hide. I stepped into the open, hands raised. The lead purifier aimed his flamer at me, his vox grill hissing with static as he barked orders. I didn't hear. My eyes were fixed on the small glass viewport in his helmet, on the reflection of my own face. He hesitated, just for a moment. That was enough. The lights flickered, the air thickened, something unseen moved through the vents, through the metal, through us. I heard screams from down the hall, the sound of melting armor, the crackle of promethium igniting flesh. The purifier before me collapsed, his body twisting, reshaping, breaking apart into something new. I didn't run, I only watched. The mark on my wrist blazed like molten gold. When the noise died, the corridor was silent except for the sound of dripping. The purifiers were gone, or rather what had been them was gone. The walls glistened with moisture, the floor breathed. I walked forward, unafraid, the hum returning to my ears. Each step carried the same rhythm I had felt in the chamber, steady, organic, alive. By the time I reached the tunnel again, I knew what I had to do. I would return to the pool. I would listen. Buzz. The hive had always spoken to me through the sound of machinery and the whisper of vents, but now I could finally hear what lay beneath it, the deeper voice, the one that called to all forgotten things. It wasn't evil, it wasn't madness. It was simply the truth of the universe laid bare, that all things must rot, and through that rot, life finds a way to bloom again. When I reached the door, it was already open. The pool shimmered brighter now, pulsing in welcome, and as I stepped toward it, shedding the weight of everything I had ever been, I whispered the words that had been echoing in my mind since the first day the mark appeared. I am not afraid to be remade. The descent was slower this time. I knew every step, every bend in the corridor, yet everything felt subtly changed, as if the hive itself were breathing in rhythm with me. The walls sweated condensation that shimmered faintly in the dim light, and the air was warmer, thick with a strange sweetness beneath the usual industrial stench. Somewhere above, the endless production lines would be resuming their grim hymn of labor, but down here, it was quiet, too quiet. Each sound I made echoed too long. The scrape of my boots, the hiss of my breath, the soft clatter of loose debris, all of it returned to me distorted, like the hive was whispering my movements back with intent. I told myself I was walking toward death, that whatever had happened in the corridor above, the purifier's screams, the flicker of lights, the bodies that melted into new shapes, was enough proof that this was wrong. I tried to hold on to fear, to anchor myself with it, but it slipped through me like smoke. I wasn't afraid, not anymore. The mark on my wrist pulsed softly beneath the skin, warm as a heartbeat, and with each pulse, I felt clarity. I remembered faces from the dorm, the girl who used to hum old hymns while she worked, the man with the burnt arm who once dreamed of reaching the upper hive, the silent overseer who whipped us without hate, only duty. They were gone now, turned to ash or something else entirely. But their voices lived in that hum. I could feel them. When I reached the chamber, the door was no longer rusted shut. It had opened fully, as though expecting me. The air inside was humid and alive. Fungal tendrils crawled up the walls like veins, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. The pool in the center had grown, no longer a mere puddle, but a living mirror spanning nearly the entire room. It rippled before I even touched it. "Why do you call me?" I whispered, my voice trembling, not with fear but with something that felt close to longing. The hum answered. It filled the air, the floor, my lungs, my skull, a sound too deep to truly be sound. I sank to my knees beside the pool. The reflection that met my eyes wasn't mine, not exactly. My features were softer, more fluid, the skin faintly luminescent. The exhaustion that had once hollowed my face was gone. The reflection smiled at me. "I didn't come to worship," I said. "I only want to understand." The surface rippled, as if amused. Then, impossibly, it breathed out. A faint mist rose from the pool and curled around my hands. It was cool, and yet it pulsed with warmth beneath it, like air exhaled from living lungs. I watched it drift, swirl, and then sink into my skin. The world blurred. I was no longer in the hive. I was walking through a vast garden of metal and bone. Towering spires of decayed machinery, twisted upward like trees. Vines of cable and sinew crawled over them, blooming into strange pulsing growths that shimmered in colors I had no name for. The air smelled of wet soil and oil. In the distance I heard the faint rhythmic chant of thousands of voices, not in pain, not in worship, but in harmony, and above it all, a single presence pulsed like a heartbeat through the world, not divine, not demonic, simply vast. It didn't speak in words. It showed me the endless chain of laborers like myself, millions across 1,000 worlds, all feeding the Imperium's hunger. The factories that consumed us and the cities that forgot us. The truth that we were all soil, meant to be spent and replaced. Then it showed me something else, that in the soil, things grow. When I woke, I was kneeling again beside the pool, but the mist still hung around me, faintly glowing. My body ached as though something beneath my skin was shifting. My thoughts were sharp, crystalline. I looked down at my wrist. The mark was no longer just a faint glow. It had blossomed into a small branching pattern that traced up my arm, like golden roots. And beneath it, I could feel something alive. I should have been terrified. Instead, I wept. Not from sorrow, but from the strange, terrible beauty of it all. The hive had never felt more alive. The metal sang softly beneath my fingertips. The vents whispered like distant trees. Everything pulsed. Everything breathed. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone down here. In the dark corners of the chamber, something moved, slow, deliberate, graceful. Shapes formed out of the shadows, humanoid but fluid, their outlines flickering between flesh and growth, light and decay. They didn't attack, they simply stood there watching. And I understood. They were not monsters, they were what came after. I woke with the feeling that time had folded over itself. The light had changed, not the cold fluorescence of the hive, but something warmer, golden, seeping through the cracks of the metal walls like sunrise leaking into a tomb. My skin glimmered faintly where the mark had spread overnight, its roots curling up my shoulder, delicate as filigree. When I moved, the metal beneath my palm trembled, not from vibration, but from awareness. I couldn't tell if I'd slept, or simply stopped existing for a while. The shapes that had stood in the shadows before were gone, but I could still feel them, their presence lingering like fingerprints on glass. They had watched me with something close to recognition, not hunger, not hostility but kinship. There was food on the floor beside me, real food. A ration bar, half unwrapped, and a flask of clear water. The water wasn't recycled or chemical, it smelled clean, impossibly so. I stared at it for a long moment before drinking, expecting poison or hallucination, but when it touched my tongue, it was as if I'd been remade. For the first time in my life, I tasted purity. The sound returned, that low, deep resonance humming somewhere beyond the edge of hearing. I felt it in my bones. It wasn't coming from the pool anymore, but from beneath it, deeper in the world, deeper than the hive itself. I knelt beside it, pressing my ear to the metal floor, and for a heartbeat, I thought I heard voices. Not prayers, not orders, just breathing, dozens of breaths in rhythm, then hundreds, then thousands. They were alive, not the overseers or workers, but something older, buried beneath the layers of industry and filth, something that had been sleeping, waiting for a heartbeat to match its own, mine. I thought of the sermons the overseers recited between shifts, the rote benedictions about the Emperor's light and mankind's purity. They had always felt hollow, words spoken to machines rather than men, but this was real. This was the sound of creation still breathing beneath decay. I don't know how long I stayed like that, listening, hours maybe, long enough for the hum to settle into my pulse, long enough for me to forget that I was supposed to go back. The thought of returning to the dorms, to the endless grey of labor, felt suddenly absurd, as if I'd once been a different person entirely. When I finally stood, the chamber seemed larger. The fungal glow along the walls pulsed brighter, colors shifting like veins beneath living skin. The air itself shimmered faintly, and for a moment I thought I could see shapes moving within it, vast fluid things, like silhouettes made of breath. I took a step toward the door, and it opened for me. The corridors beyond were empty. No patrols, no overseers, no echo of footsteps, just silence. It was the same path I'd walked 100 times before, but now it felt like a cathedral, every pipe, every rusted beam part of something sacred. I ran my hand along the wall, and it responded with a faint vibration, a note that harmonized with the hum inside my chest. When I reached the junction, I saw movement. A figure stood ahead, partially hidden by the light. I froze. It was Lyra, or what had once been her. She'd been on the assembly lines before the collapse, small, frail, with a voice that cracked when she sang. Now her skin shimmered with faint iridescence, her eyes glowing softly like twin embers beneath her brow. The roots, like mine, ran along her neck and jaw, but she wasn't dying. She looked peaceful, whole. I tried to speak, but my throat closed around the words. She smiled. You heard it too. Her voice was calm, distant, like someone remembering a dream. I tried to fight it, she said, stepping closer. At first I thought it was chaos, corruption, damnation, everything they warned us about. But then, I saw what it really was. Life, not like theirs. Not stolen or forced, just free. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she reached out and touched my arm. Her fingers brushed the glowing roots that ran beneath my skin, and in that instant, I saw everything. Her memories, her pain, her surrender. The overseers dragging her away. The screams, the silence, the warmth that came after. She hadn't been taken, she'd become. It's not death, she whispered. It's the end of dying. I felt tears on my cheeks. I didn't know if they were mine. Lyra's gaze softened. When the hive breathes, it breathes through us. Don't run from it. And before I could reach for her again, she stepped back, fading into the shimmer, her outline dissolving into air, her last words hanging like a prayer. Don't run. I stood alone in the corridor for a long time, trembling. My heart ached, not from fear, but from recognition, because she was right. The hive was breathing, and every exhale carried her voice. I pressed my palm against the wall, closed my eyes, and let it move through me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a slave. The smell of ash never left me that day. It clung to my skin, soaked into my breath, and followed me through the corridors like a ghost. When I closed my eyes, I could still see the overseer's remains, scattered, steaming, reduced to fragments of a man who had once been untouchable. They had taken him without a sound. That was what frightened me most. There was no scream, no struggle, no warning, only the slow dissolution of flesh into smoke, the faint whisper of a name I did not know. I wanted to believe it had been an act of vengeance by the Emperor, some holy judgment for all the lashes and hunger, but in my heart I knew it was something else. Something watching, something waiting. Sleep became impossible. The hum of the machinery took on a rhythm I could not ignore, almost like breathing. Every piston stroke, every hiss of pressure seemed to echo from beneath the floor, and when I finally did close my eyes, I felt it, a pulse beneath my cot, a faint warmth seeping through the metal. It spoke no words, but it felt like recognition, as if the walls themselves were aware of me, of all of us. I thought of the overseer's eyes before he vanished, how they had softened, how the tension had left his body like he'd seen something beautiful. That thought sickened me. Beauty was not for people like us. I tried to drown it out, worked harder, spoke the litanies louder. I tore open my palms with the weight of the conveyors, reciting every verse of praise I could remember. The Emperor protects, the Emperor provides, the Emperor sees, but even those words felt hollow now, swallowed by the endless rumble beneath me. My voice cracked on the syllables, and the others began to look at me differently, some afraid, others envious, as if I had touched something sacred and unclean at once. Maybe I had. Maybe it was too late to untouch it. There was a night when the power grid failed, and for the first time in years the lights went out. Pure darkness filled the manufactorum. The only sound was the low tremor of machines still working somewhere deep below. I pressed my hand against the wall, and felt it shudder faintly under my touch. It was like the hive was breathing with me, through me. A part of me wanted to let go, to stop resisting, to allow that rhythm to swallow me whole. For the first time, I imagined peace not as freedom but as surrender. That terrified me more than death. I whispered to the dark, to anything that would listen, I belong to the Emperor, not to you. My words came back to me, distorted, the echoes stretching, warping until they didn't sound like my voice anymore. Something answered, not in words but in sensation, a pulse, deep and warm, threading through the floor, up my legs into my spine. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, grounding myself in pain, clinging to the one thing that still felt human. When the lights came back, the other workers stared. They said my eyes looked different. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound that didn't feel like mine. I told them the Emperor had tested me and found me strong, but inside I knew strength had nothing to do with it. The corruption didn't come with rage or violence. It came with quiet, it came with understanding. It whispered promises of release, not from duty, but from despair itself. And yet I resisted, even as my body trembled with exhaustion. Even as my prayers rang empty in the recycled air, I clung to the one truth left to me, that to serve, to suffer, was to exist. Anything else, even salvation, was heresy. But as I turned back to my post, as the machines resumed their endless motion, I could feel it beneath me again. That faint warmth, patient, forgiving, almost kind. It didn't need to rush. It would wait. It always waited, and I realized then that my defiance meant nothing to it. Whether I resisted or not, it would still be there, deep within the hive, breathing in unison with us all. For the first time, I understood true despair, not the fear of dying, but the fear that nothing you do matters at all. They said dawn had come, though no one here ever saw the sun. The overhead lumens flickered back to life after the blackout, and for a moment, everything seemed the same machines, the same gray dust coating our skin, the same endless cycle of motion. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the silence that followed. It was as if the hive had taken a breath and held it, waiting, listening. I moved slower that day. The weight of my tools felt wrong in my hands, like they were no longer made for work. The air hummed faintly, low and constant, a vibration that seeped into my bones. I thought it was the machinery, until I realized it continued even when the belt stopped moving. That was when I started hearing the others whisper, the same name spoken in hushed tones, half prayer, half warning. The beneath. I had never heard it before. Down here everything has a name, every vent, every shaft, every shift, but this one was spoken with reverence, as if it wasn't a place but a presence. We were told never to go below level 19, the pathways there were unstable, they said, old, dangerous, the kind of place even servitors were rarely sent. Yet, lately, I'd seen men go missing, one cycle, their name marked on the work roster, the next erased. No one asked where they went, no one dared. The overseers said nothing, only that productivity must not suffer, and it didn't. Somehow, even when half our crew disappeared, the work never slowed, machines ran smoother, energy output rose. It was as if the hive itself was compensating. I remember one of them, a man named Revik. He was older than most, with scars along his scalp from a lifetime of near-fatal accidents. He used to say we were the Emperor's lungs, breathing his will into the galaxy. He was the kind of man who prayed even while bleeding. But after the blackout, I saw him standing alone near the coolant pipes, eyes closed, hands pressed to the wall as if listening. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I asked him what he was doing. He smiled faintly and said, "It's listening back." Then he laughed, soft, almost joyous, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. That night I dreamed of the beneath. I saw corridors swallowed by roots of black metal, pulsating faintly with light. Not artificial light, something older, like the glow of veins beneath skin. I heard the faint echo of Revik's laugh, distant and wrong, and when I woke, my hands were trembling. There was something smeared across my palms, a dark residue that smelled faintly of oil and decay. I scrubbed until my skin bled, but the scent lingered. It always lingered. The next shift I noticed the walls again. They were breathing slower now, like the hive had settled into a rhythm that matched my pulse. The others avoided eye contact, working in silence. Even the overseers seemed nervous, their voices clipped, their movements sharp. Something was wrong, and yet, beneath the fear, I felt something else, something dangerously close to comfort. It was as though the hive had finally acknowledged me, seen me, accepted me as one of its own. During ration break, I sat alone and stared into the recycled water basin. My reflection was faint, distorted by the rippling light, but I swear, for an instant, it smiled back at me, a small knowing curve that wasn't mine. My stomach turned cold. I closed my eyes and whispered the only prayer I had left. "The Emperor protects," the words caught in my throat. I tried again, louder this time. "The Emperor protects," but the air seemed to swallow the sound before it could reach my ears. When I opened my eyes, the reflection was gone, only the ripples remained. Something deep below had begun to stir. I told myself I wouldn't go down there. Not like the others. I repeated it every night before sleep, as though the words themselves could shield me. I will not descend, but it was already too late. The idea had rooted itself somewhere deep, whispering softly at the edge of thought. What began as curiosity became a pulse, a pull that throbbed behind my eyes every time I passed the maintenance lifts. 3 cycles later, when the upper coolant ducts burst, and the overseers called for volunteers to inspect the lower passages, I didn't hesitate. I said yes before they even finished speaking. I told myself it was duty, a chance to earn extra rations, maybe even rest, but the truth was simpler, more shameful. I wanted to see it. The beneath. The elevator shuddered as it sank, metal grinding against rusted rails. The light panels flickered, dimming one by one until only the emergency lumen remained. The air grew warmer, heavier. The scent changed too, from the dry tang of steel and ozone to something wet, almost organic. It clung to my tongue, thick and metallic. When the doors opened, I expected darkness. Instead I found light, faint, sickly, and greenish, seeping through cracks in the walls. The pipes here were different. They weren't welded or bolted, but grown, curved, intertwined like veins beneath flesh. Every few meters, a soft vibration passed through them, and the metal seemed to flex ever so slightly. "Breathing. Anyone here?" My voice came out small, swallowed by the endless hum. The Voxlink crackled. No response from above. I checked the readings on my auspex, but the signal was useless, interference thick as fog. I walked. Every step echoed strangely, as if the ground itself didn't want to let the sound go. Once I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping through the ribs of the corridor. I turned, but there was nothing. Only the pipes, glistening faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed familiar. The further I went, the warmer it became, until beads of sweat rolled down my spine. My breath came in shallow gasps. I should have turned back. I knew it, but something deep in the air, a cadence, a whisper beneath the hum, urged me onward. Then I heard it clearly. Not the hum, but a voice. At first I thought it was a recording, maybe an old maintenance message looping through the system, but then it said my name. Not once, not shouted, just spoken softly, the way my mother used to say it when I was small. Omar. The sound froze me where I stood. I looked around, torch sweeping across the wet metal. Nothing. The voice came again, closer now, warm and tender. Omar, why are you afraid? It came from behind the wall. My knees weakened. I pressed my hand to the metal. It was hot, almost burning, and for a moment, I swore I felt a heartbeat pulsing beneath my palm. Slow, steady, too human to be mechanical. The voice whispered again, softer, almost kind. Come closer. You've worked so long, so hard. Let go. Rest. I closed my eyes, and the hum filled my head, until I couldn't tell if it was sound or thought. I wanted to pull away, but my fingers wouldn't move. It felt good. The warmth. It felt like being held, like being remembered. Then just as suddenly, it stopped. The warmth vanished, the hum snapped silent, and I stumbled backward, gasping. The walls were just walls again, dead and still. When I looked down, there was something on my hand, black residue, the same as before, but this time, it pulsed faintly beneath my skin, crawling upward like ink spreading through water. I wrapped my hand in cloth, and ran. The lift was gone, the tunnels stretched endlessly in every direction. The hum began again, fainter now, but rising, swelling, and within it, a voice, not one but many, overlapping, whispering the same phrase again and again. Downward is peace. At some point, I stopped running. There was no direction anymore. The tunnels looped back into themselves like a thought you couldn't escape. Every passage led me deeper, though I couldn't say how I knew that. The air grew thicker, humid, filled with the faint musk of oil and decay. My breath rasped like a machine struggling for fuel. The first few hours or days time dissolved down here. I tried to mark my path with chalk. I would draw the aquila on the wall each time I turned a corner, a habit from old drills. But the marks faded faster than they should have, the powder absorbed by the sweating metal. Soon I stopped bothering. The symbols meant nothing here. The whispers came more frequently now, and not just in the walls. Sometimes they came from behind me, sometimes from within me. A chorus of familiar voices, my crewmates, my mother, the overseer, all woven together, speaking with a single patient rhythm. They never threatened me, never screamed. That was the worst part. They were kind. Omar, why keep suffering? Do you not deserve to rest? Every time I closed my eyes I saw flashes, pale faces, wide eyes staring from within the walls, some pleading, some smiling, all waiting. I found a resting alcove, small enough to feel safe, and sat down. My pulse thundered in my ears. I hadn't eaten in, I didn't know. The rations were gone. The water flask leaked from a crack in its side. I pressed my head against the metal, and tried to remember the sound of wind, or rain, anything that wasn't mechanical, but all I heard was the hum, that slow, breathing sound that filled the air like a pulse. I tried to match my breathing to it. In, out, in, out. The rhythm steadied me. It felt almost natural, almost human. The black mark on my hand had spread up my wrist. The veins there glowed faintly in the dark, threads of dull green light winding beneath the skin. It didn't hurt anymore. It pulsed in harmony with the walls. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. The fear had gone somewhere else, replaced by something I didn't recognize, a stillness that felt like clarity. I began to understand the others, the ones who vanished down here and never returned. I used to think they were taken. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe they'd found something better than survival, something quiet. Sometimes when I moved, the pipes would flex as if reacting to me. They'd tremble lightly, and I'd feel a vibration in my bones as though they were listening. I started speaking aloud to them, softly at first, then more openly, like I was confessing. I'm tired, I said. One cycle. I've worked since I was a child. Every day the same, every night the same. For what? The hum shifted, deepened. It wasn't an answer, but it felt like one. I smiled without meaning to. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Later, or maybe immediately after, Time folds strangely here. I found a door, heavy, embossed with symbols I didn't recognize. A low hiss escaped from the seams, like something breathing behind it. I pressed my ear against the metal and heard the same words, whispered by countless voices in unison. Let go. I placed my hand on the door. The black veins pulsed faster, brighter. I felt warmth flooding my chest, spreading outward, dissolving the ache in my limbs. For a moment, I believed I could feel the entire world breathing with me. And then, for the first time since I descended, I laughed. Not a manic sound, not despair, just laughter, pure and low, the kind that comes when you finally stop pretending you're in control. When it faded, I whispered back to the voices, I understand. The door was not meant to open, not for human hands at least. The symbols carved into its surface shifted when I touched them, slow and fluid like oil in water. The warmth that had seeped into me before now turned feverish. My pulse matched the rhythm in the walls. The hum deepened until it became a voice, not heard but felt, vibrating through my ribs, my skull, my breath. It didn't sound like words, yet I understood it. I didn't need permission to open it. I simply pushed. The air hissed out, thick and warm. The smell was sweet, rotting incense and metal dust. I stepped through and the light changed. Everything glowed dimly, not from lamps or fire, but from veins of living metal that ran through the chamber like roots. It pulsed softly, slow as a heartbeat. At the center stood a throne, not imperial, not holy, but intimate, constructed from what looked like bone and rusted machine parts, wrapped in layers of cloth that shimmered faintly with oil. Something sat upon it, something that once might have been human. Its body was fused into the machinery, half flesh, half brass. Tubes coiled through its ribs and vanished into the floor. Its head tilted slightly toward me, and I realized its eyes were open, two pale lights, faint but aware. Welcome, it said. The voice wasn't external. It bloomed inside my head, woven from every whisper I had ever heard down here. It wasn't male or female. It was familiar. My throat tightened. Who are you? I am the weight you carried, it said, the pain you refused, the stillness you feared. I am what they made you leave behind. I stepped closer. The air shimmered. My breath fogged in the heat, then vanished again. The figure, moved slowly as though the machinery resisted. Its fingers reached toward me. They were skeletal, yet graceful. Do you know why you're still alive? It asked. I shook my head. Because you never stopped working, it said softly. Even when hope rotted, even when faith became a wound, you built their empire with your hands and they forgot your name. You kept moving, you kept breathing. That persistence is divinity. I wanted to argue, to say that divinity was far from this, from rust and ruin and pain, but no words came. There was truth in it, cold and sharp. They say the emperor sits upon his throne, it continued, its voice trembling like static, but his light does not reach here. Here, in the dark, another kind of faith grows, faith in endurance, faith in survival, faith in the ones who never ascended. Its hand brushed my cheek, cold as the grave. You are one of them. Something inside me cracked open, not in horror but in recognition. The black veins running through my arm pulsed once, twice, then flared. I could feel them spreading across my chest, my throat, my temples. The light wasn't burning anymore. It was soothing. It filled every hollow space inside me. I fell to my knees, but not in fear. The floor was warm beneath me, alive. I can't go back, I whispered. There is nowhere to go, the voice replied. Only here, only now. Let the labor end. I felt a hand, or perhaps a thought, on the back of my neck. My head lowered instinctively. For the first time since birth I stopped resisting. There was silence then. No hum, no breath, no machine, just silence, vast, perfect, endless. And in that silence, I felt peace, not joy, not salvation, just the quiet relief of no longer being alone. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing. The figure on the throne was gone. The room had changed, or perhaps I had. The roots of metal glowed brighter now, pulsing in the same rhythm as my heart. I looked down at my hands. The black was gone. My skin was pale and smooth, threaded with faint veins of light. For a moment, I didn't know if I was still human, but I didn't care. I was still, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. The morning broke without sound. Not even the usual thrum of the manufactorum carried through the metal bones of the hab blocks. It was as if the entire world had paused to listen for something, some echo that refused to come. I awoke to the absence of noise, and it unsettled me more than any explosion or alarm ever could. The air tasted still, stale, almost reverent. My hands trembled as I touched the cold rail beside my cot. For the first time I realized that the hum of machines, the endless chorus of gears and steam and servitor chants, was gone. Something deep beneath the floor had gone silent. We all noticed it, though none of us spoke. The shift in rhythm made the skin crawl. The guards outside the hab stood too still, their visors dim. Even the light from the lumen strips flickered in a way I had never seen, slower, like a pulse. I tried to pray, but the words caught in my throat, coming out dry and hollow. There was no warmth in them, no faith, only habit. And yet, there was peace. It came like fog, soft and heavy, curling around thought and fear alike. I felt it as I walked through the empty corridor toward my station. The sound of my boots echoed strangely, drawn out, distorted by the silence. Each step felt rehearsed, as though I was moving through a dream I had already lived. In the distance a machine spirit hummed lowly, but its rhythm faltered. 3 beats, a pause, then 2. It sounded almost like breathing. They said the deep manufactories had been sealed for maintenance, a lie so thin it didn't even try to hide itself. No maintenance ever lasted this long, no silence this complete. We all knew something had happened in the depths, but to ask was to invite punishment, or worse, attention. I caught sight of a servitor slumped against a bulkhead, its augmetics twitching weakly. Its voice box emitted a faint whisper of static, looping a single half-formed syllable again and again. I bent closer. It wasn't malfunctioning, it was murmuring, praying, to whom I could not tell. There was something different in the air below. It wasn't just the heat or the promethium fumes. It was like the world itself had turned inward, waiting as if holding its breath. Some nights I could feel vibrations through the floor, faint tremors that no one else seemed to notice. When I lay still enough, I could almost mistake them for a heartbeat, a slow, patient rhythm rising from the deep where he had fallen. I told myself it was the memory of the machines, some lingering vibration in the pipes, but I didn't believe it. Not really. One evening, while finishing my shift, I looked up and saw the Imperial Aquila above the station door. The twin-headed eagle stared down as always, but it was different. The metal seemed darker, the wings more burdened. It felt less like a symbol of protection, and more like a shadow of something vast and watching. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw it move, a subtle tilt of the head, a flicker of recognition. My breath caught, and I whispered an apology to no one. We spoke little now. The workers kept to themselves, eyes lowered, voices hushed. We performed our duties in silence, not because we feared reprisal, but because speaking felt wrong, intrusive, like noise would disturb the balance of something sacred. The air was colder each day. The heat from the furnaces should have burned us alive, but it didn't. The air no longer obeyed, the light no longer behaved, and though no orders had come from above, every worker began to move slower, more carefully, as though following an unseen rhythm. I did too. I didn't know why, and beneath it all, I began to hear something, faint, familiar, and terribly human, a breath that was not mine, a whisper that wasn't quite sound. It said my name. I don't remember when the quiet began to feel alive. At first it was only the absence of noise, the pauses between shellfire, the hollow breathing of wind through fractured walls. But then in that silence something stirred, a rhythm not of this world, pulsing faintly beneath the ruin, like the dying heartbeat of the planet itself. I sat by the window, or what was left of it, staring out at the dim horizon. Ash drifted through the air soft as snow, catching the last traces of dying light. The streets were empty now, no soldiers, no beggars, no sermons, just the slow, endless hum that seemed to come from within my skull. For the first time I did not fight it. I let the sound breathe inside me. It filled the hollow places where fear once lived, not as comfort but as understanding, a kind of terrible peace. Every thought, every wound, every echo of my own despair folded inward until I felt myself thinning, dissolving into the same pale haze that cloaked the city. The corruption didn't need to consume me violently, it only needed my permission, and I gave it, not in surrender, but in quiet exhaustion. There was no pain, only release. My skin felt weightless, my heartbeat distant. The world blurred into dreamlike shapes, walls melting, the floor rippling like liquid glass. My reflection in a shard of metal was unrecognizable, Eyes too dark, smile too calm. I whispered, not to anyone, not even to myself. Maybe this was never about surviving. The hum deepened, and for a fleeting instant, I thought I saw the city breathe, as if all its broken souls were exhaling together, one final sigh of unity before oblivion. I felt it then, that strange divine sadness, not terror, not resistance. Just a tender, unbearable grief at how gentle the end could be. I feel the weight of my body lessen each passing hour, as if the flesh itself were surrendering before my will does. The air tastes metallic now, dry and lifeless. It clings to the back of my throat like powdered rust. I move through the same corridor I've walked 1,000 times before, though it no longer feels solid. The walls breathe. The light flickers in slow, deliberate patterns, like the pulse of some great unseen organism. Somewhere in a hum of distant machinery, I swear I can hear the rhythm of a heartbeat that is not my own. I can't tell whether the world is dissolving, or if I am. My hands tremble when I hold them before me. The veins seem darker, the skin thin as parchment. Beneath the surface something stirs, not movement exactly, but suggestion. I try not to look too long. The more I stare, the more I begin to sense that my body no longer belongs entirely to me. The corruption doesn't burn or bleed anymore, it whispers. It breathes softly in my ear like a secret too intimate to reject. I used to count the hours by the sound of the forge sirens, by the shift change in the manufactorum below. Now time is only measured by decay. The servitors outside my hab block move with stiff precision, uncaring, unfeeling, eternal. I envy them. They will never feel what I feel, this strange tenderness in dying, this soft unmaking of self. Somewhere deep within, a part of me welcomes it. I hate that part. I hate how calm it is. Sometimes I remember the sermons, the preacher's voice echoing through the dust. To resist corruption is to preserve the soul, to surrender is to be unmade. Yet here I stand, trembling in a silence so complete it feels holy. The corruption has not come as a scream, but as a lullaby, and in the stillness, I can no longer tell which path preserves me, resistance or release. The city outside the window has gone quiet. No vox calls, no lights from the hab towers, only the distant thrum of engines buried deep beneath the surface, keeping alive whatever fragments of the Imperium still linger here. I used to find that sound reassuring. Now it's only a reminder that I am still tethered, not alive, not dead, just waiting in between, waiting for something to finish me. When I sleep I see faces, not human, not entirely alien, but remembered wrong, as if the corruption were piecing together the shapes of my memories with hands that don't understand the concept of beauty. I wake to find traces of those dreams on my skin, faint ridges, soft discolorations like fingerprints pressed from the inside out. I wash them away, but they return. Each morning they return, deeper and more deliberate. It's strange how peace begins to feel like grief. The more my body yields, the less I suffer. The pain fades first, then the fear. What's left is something hollow but gentle, like the quiet after a storm that's erased every familiar landmark. I walk among the ruins of my own nerves, feeling less but understanding more. The corruption is not cruel, it's indifferent, and in that indifference I begin to sense something that feels disturbingly close to mercy. I find myself speaking aloud now, to no one in particular. My voice sounds different, softer, as though the air itself muffles it out of pity. I tell the empty room I'm not afraid anymore, and I'm not sure if that's the truth or the last lie I'll ever tell myself. Because deep down, beneath the calm, there's still a faint thread of terror, wound tight around what little remains of me. But even that is unraveling. As I close my eyes tonight, I can feel something move beneath the surface of my chest, a pulse slow and patient, not mine but not entirely foreign. I don't fight it, I only listen. It's almost beautiful the way decay can hum like a song when you stop resisting its rhythm. Tomorrow, if I still exist, I think I'll stop calling this corruption. The word no longer fits, it feels too harsh, too human. What's happening to me feels older than sin, older than the Imperium itself. It feels like becoming part of something vast, silent and infinite, something that doesn't care whether I live or die, only that I finally understand. There comes a point when the body no longer obeys, not out of defiance, but because obedience itself loses meaning. I feel that now in the way my limbs no longer respond with urgency, the way breath drifts in and out without my command. I am here but not entirely. The world has softened at the edges. blurred like a painting exposed to too much light. The walls no longer seem to hold shape, and the air once cold feels almost tender as it moves against my skin. It's strange to discover that surrender doesn't arrive as defeat. It comes instead like the slow closing of a door, soundless and inevitable. My thoughts are quieter now. I no longer argue with myself, no longer recite the prayers I once whispered under my breath. The words have dissolved, leaving only meaning, and that meaning is stillness. I stand in it like one might stand in rain, letting it soak through every layer until resistance becomes absurd. I used to dream of escape, of a shuttle lifting from this ruined manufactorum world, carrying me toward the stars. I used to believe there was still a place untouched by decay. Now even those fantasies feel childish. There is no elsewhere. There is only this, the slow unraveling of matter and memory, the merging of what I was with what I was never meant to be. The corruption doesn't feel like an invader anymore. It feels like a mirror, showing me the truth I spent a lifetime denying, that all flesh, all steel, all empires, eventually become dust. The first time I felt it inside me, truly felt it, I recoiled. It was wrong, blasphemous, unclean. But now as it moves through my veins like liquid glass, I cannot call it evil. It is simply existence, stripped of illusion. Even pain has taken on a strange beauty. There is a rhythm to it, a sacred geometry I never noticed before. Each ache, each tremor, feels like a verse in some cosmic chant that has been echoing since before the birth of terror itself. I am only now learning the melody. Outside the forges have gone silent. The air smells of ozone and decay, a bitter perfume that settles into every breath. I walk barefoot through the corridor, the floor cool beneath my skin. The lights above pulse faintly, dimming and brightening in a heartbeat pattern that seems to sync with my own. For the first time I do not feel alone. Something unseen watches, not with malice, but with a terrible patience, as if it has been waiting centuries for this moment of surrender. I pause before a shattered viewport. Beyond it, the city lies in shadow. Towers that once scraped the smog-choked sky now bow like the ribs of a colossal corpse. Fires burn in the distance, though no one remains to tend them. The ashes swirl upward in silent spirals, merging with the clouds. It's beautiful in a way I cannot explain. The Imperium taught us to see decay as failure, but now I see it as continuation, the next step in a cycle too vast for human pride to interrupt. A memory surfaces, my mother's voice soft and steady, telling me that faith was not about certainty but endurance. She would light a single lumen each night and say, "Even the smallest flame resists the void." I smile faintly. I think I understand her now. Resistance isn't only about survival, it's about meaning. And sometimes the only way to preserve meaning is to let go of what demands it. I touch my chest and feel no fear. The pulse beneath my palm is fading. Yes, but what replaces it is something larger, a slow, deliberate vibration that resonates through the bones of the world itself. I could call it corruption. I could call it enlightenment, but neither word fits. It is simply truth, a truth too vast for flesh to carry forever. My knees weaken. I sink to the floor, resting my back against the cold metal wall. The hum of machinery beneath me is steady, almost like breathing. I close my eyes and feel the air move through me, not into my lungs but through. The boundary between what is me and what is not me begins to blur. The distinction feels childish now, a story told to comfort the terrified. For the first time in years I feel light, weightless. My thoughts drift outward, scattering like ash in the wind. The name I carried, the guilt, the prayers, the hunger, all dissolve into the same quiet current. It does not feel like dying. It feels like remembering something ancient, something I once was before I was given shape and name. I exhale long and slow, and in that breath, I think I hear the world whisper back. Not words, not even sound, just presence. A vast unending stillness that feels like peace. I do not fight it anymore. I do not need to. I had always imagined death would be loud, that it would arrive with screaming gunfire or the grinding of metal, something to mark the end, something that would remind the universe that I had existed. But when it finally came for me, it was quiet. So quiet I almost missed it. The air hangs still around me, heavy with the scent of rust and ozone. My eyes are open, but I no longer see the world as I once did. The outlines of things, the pipes, the walls, the faint glow of lumen strips are thinning, dissolving into light. I reach out, but my hand passes through a veil of dust that no longer clings to skin. It's as though I'm watching myself fade from within a dream I can't wake from. A part of me wants to resist, to find something solid, to prove that I still belong to the realm of flesh. But even that thought feels alien now. The fear that once kept me tethered has ebbed away, leaving only a strange serenity. The pain too has gone, not because it healed, but because it became irrelevant. My body feels like a story I finished reading long ago, its words still echoing somewhere deep but without urgency. Outside, the world continues its quiet ruin. The manufactorum hums faintly, though no hands guide its machines. The sky bleeds pale orange light through clouds thick with ash. I can see movement, shadows drifting where people once walked, echoes of laborers and soldiers all gone now. They move without form, like smoke remembering the shape of fire. I wonder if I'll join them soon. I wonder if I already have. When I blink, memories flicker, not in sequence but in sensation. The smell of wet stone after the rains of Persephone hive. The warmth of a ration fire shared among strangers. The rhythm of distant gunfire that once terrified me, but later became just another sound. And her voice, faint now, but still there, buried beneath the static of my dissolving thoughts. She used to hum when she worked, a melody too soft for the noise of the forge to swallow completely. I realize I've been hearing it all along, not through ears but through whatever remains of me. Something calls beneath the sound, low, rhythmic, ancient, not a voice, not exactly, more like the memory of a heartbeat, deep and endless, resonating through the bones of the planet. I can feel it within me, or perhaps I am within it. It's hard to tell anymore. The Emperor, they say, watches all things, but I no longer know what that means. Perhaps this is what his gaze feels like, vast, impersonal yet merciful in its silence. Or maybe it's something else entirely, something older, something that has been waiting patiently for humanity to exhaust itself. My vision flickers, the edges of the world glow faintly green, the corruption's color. I once thought it monstrous, now it seems almost holy. The light spreads from my hands, up my arms, through the cracks in my chest. It doesn't burn, it whispers, it hums like the song of distant machinery, in perfect rhythm with the pulse I no longer feel. My breath comes slower, each exhale a little more transparent than the last. There is a peace in this that terrifies me. The serenity is too complete, too consuming. It doesn't care who I was, what I loved, what I feared. It only asks that I stop pretending that I was ever separate. For a moment I almost laugh. A quiet, breathless sound, to think I spent my life fearing this, fighting it, when all along, it was only bringing me home. I sink fully to the ground, the metal floor now soft beneath me, like sand shifting underwater. The air moves through me freely now, carrying fragments of thought away with each passing second. I am less than I was, but in that lessening there is freedom. No hunger, no pain, no guilt, only motion, small, infinite, without beginning or end. I can feel the world folding inward, like a vast breath being drawn in. The light around me brightens until everything, the walls, the sky, the ruins, dissolve into one seamless glow. There's no up or down, no past or future, only stillness, vast and merciful. Somewhere in that endless quiet, I think I hear a voice, faint, familiar. It says my name. Or maybe it's only the wind moving through hollow corridors. Either way I answer. And in that answering I vanish. When he was gone, the air did not change. The wind still dragged its slow breath through the ruins of Persephone hive, weaving between broken spires and rusted sky rails like an old machine that didn't know it had outlived its purpose. The world did not pause for him. It never does for anyone. The manufactorum where he had once labored still groaned in the half-dark, its machines moving on blind habit. Sparks leapt and died along empty assembly lines where no hands guided the servitors. The city's veins pulsed faintly with promethium, pushing heat through pipes toward nowhere. Somewhere deep below, a reactor hummed, loyal, obedient, unaware that the humans it once served had turned to dust. There was a strange cleanliness to it all, a stillness that came after too much noise. The echoes of war, the hunger, the prayers whispered to deaf gods, all of it had thinned to a single constant tone. If one listened closely, one might think it was the sound of peace. But it wasn't. It was just the world exhaling, tired of carrying the weight of the living. No one came to collect his body. There was no body to find. The others, the few who still survived among the ruins, spoke of it in murmurs, as if afraid that the act of remembering would summon something from the dust. They said he'd been taken by the machine spirits, or by the rot, or by the Emperor's light, depending on who one asked. They said the air around the manufactorum shimmered for days afterward, as if refusing to return to its old dull color. A scavenger once ventured there, hoping to find tools or scrap to sell in the lower levels. He came back trembling, eyes wide, muttering that the walls had whispered to him, that the metal had sung. They laughed at him, of course. Madness was cheaper than faith in a place like this. Yet, the manufactorum remained avoided. Not out of superstition, but out of instinct, as if something in the blood knew it was no longer meant for human hands. Above, the sky was a pale wound. The clouds had lost their color long ago, replaced by the dim reflection of orbital fires. Trade ships no longer passed this way. The Imperium had long since abandoned the sector. No reinforcements, no aid, no sermons from the ecclesiarchy. Only the silent gaze of distant stars, cold and indifferent. But even among silence, the world remembers. It remembers not through stories but through residue. The way ash clings to metal, the way light refracts strangely in the air where he once stood. The way some nights the manufactorum hums just a little louder, as if replaying a rhythm that was once a man's heartbeat. Sometimes the wind moves differently through the corridors, carrying a faint sound, a low hum, like a voice trapped between dimensions. Those who have heard it swear that it sounds like a sigh. Others say it's a song, but no one listens for long. In the Imperium of man, curiosity is a kind of sin. The world shifts slowly, swallowing the remnants of what was once human. Moss creeps up through cracks in ferrocrete. The banners of the Imperium, faded and brittle, still hang from their posts, their edges curling inward as if tired of proclaiming what no one remembers. The Aquila still watches from the walls, its eyes blackened by soot. It too waits perhaps for orders that will never come. The few survivors of Persephone Hive, those still strong enough to walk, still desperate enough to breathe, have learned not to speak of hope. They move through the ruins like ghosts pretending to be alive, scavenging what the dead have left behind. Some of them whisper prayers before sleep, not to the Emperor, but to something nameless, something that feels nearer, something that hums in the pipes and glows faintly in the dark. And sometimes when they pass the manufactorum, they feel it, that faint pull, like gravity inverted. It's as though the place remembers them too, and calls softly, asking them to step inside, to see what he saw, to follow him into the quiet. Most look away. A few don't. The world keeps moving, though no one can say where to. The stars above remain untouched, and the ash never stops falling. In time the city will collapse entirely, and new stone will rise from its bones. Someone somewhere will dig through the ruins and find traces of him, the shape of a hand imprinted in metal, or a machine that hums without power. They'll wonder what it meant, who it belonged to, whether he was a saint or a sinner. The truth is neither. The truth is that he simply stopped being afraid, and the world in its cold way accepted him for it. They began to speak of him years later, when the name of Persephone Hive had already faded from most charts. Maps marked it only as uninhabited quarantine zone. But on distant worlds among void ship crews and hive preachers, a whisper moved, the story of a worker who vanished into light. No one knew who started it. Some said it was the confession of a dying missionary, others a tale carried through vox static between collapsing stations. Yet the story persisted, mutating, surviving, the way fungus thrives where sunlight cannot reach. In some tellings he was a heretic who embraced the rot and was spared the pain of the flesh. In others he was chosen by the Emperor himself, his body consumed by radiant fire, so that his spirit could join the Astronomican's endless beacon. The two versions contradicted each other perfectly, and yet both were believed depending on what each listener needed most. Such is the mercy of myth. It reshapes despair until it resembles meaning. Across the void, the story reached Minerva's reach, a mining moon half buried under its own dust. There, the workers sang of him during the night shifts, a low chant to keep rhythm with the drills. They called him the silent witness, the man who saw the truth of labor and was swallowed by it. No priest sanctioned this hymn, but none forbade it either. The Imperium knows that sometimes faith grows best in the cracks it cannot seal. Decades later, a pilgrim ship passed near the dead world of Persephone. Its augurs detected faint energy emissions from the manufactorum ruins. Impossible, since all reactors should have gone cold centuries ago. A few zealots disembarked to investigate. They never returned. The captain declared it holy ground, ordered the ship to leave orbit, and filed a report that would never be read. The signal continued to pulse, steady and patient like a heartbeat. Back on Terra, no one spoke his name. They wouldn't have known it even if they wanted to. The archives of a billion hives record no such man, no such world. Yet in some quiet corner of the administratum, an autoquill continues to draft a work order addressed to Persephone Hive. The servitor that writes it has long since lost its eyes, but its hands keep moving. Each day it copies the same sentence: the labor shall not cease, and maybe that's the truest version of all. Not the myths of ascension or corruption, but the unbroken motion of work itself, endless, indifferent, holy in its futility. Perhaps that was what he had seen before the end, that the Imperium needs no gods, no forgiveness, only the rhythm of survival. Still, on nights when the solar storms sweep across the void, the signal from Persephone changes tone. The Vox operators say it almost sounds like breathing. They turn the dials, uneasy, and swear they hear a whisper buried in the static. Some claim it says, "I'm still here." Others, "It's quiet now." None can agree, but all fall silent afterwards, staring into the dark as though it might stare back. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, perhaps he drifts still, not in body, not in soul, but as a pattern etched into the fabric of machine song. Maybe he has become part of that ceaseless hum the mechanicus calls the omniscience echo. Or maybe he is only the silence between notes, the pause that lets the universe remember what it lost. The story ends where it began: a man, a machine, a whisper. Everything else has already been claimed by dust. And if you stand long enough among the ruins of Persephone Hive, listening to the slow pulse of buried reactors, you might hear it too, that faint exhale in the dark, not quite wind, not quite voice, a breath that could be a farewell, or a reminder that even in death, the Imperium never truly sleeps.